Happy football season, everybody, and welcome into the Graham Lincoln Mac Lane podcast presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Graham Lincoln Mac Lane. And happy football season to the Deacs. Today, we are talking Wake Forest. We had Dave Clawson on, who is another one of those coaches that we always enjoy talking to. And then we started, remember Mac, before we even started recording, we were just talking basketball with him for like 10 minutes.
Hooper. I'm sad I didn't hit record because it was great conversations about how he was just busting people's tail on the basketball court.
Yeah. Dave Clawson is a big basketball guy, which I love that. You know, we automatically have that bond, me and Dave.
Immediately.
Yeah, immediately. But he was great. So we're going to get into that interview, Mac, with Wake Forest as we continue our first week of our season previews, where it's just episode after episode after episode. This team went 4-8 last year. It was definitely a step back. 1-7 in the ACC, just one ACC when they beat Pittsburgh. They did have that really close game with Clemson. Remember, lost 17-12. Very interesting.
Hey, who didn't?
Also had the weird game against Old Dominion where they ended up winning. But a lot of things are different from last year's team when it comes to some of the main positions. We talked to Dave Clawson about that. Their win total heading into this year is 4.5.
We'll see. We'll see what happens, KG. Love this conversation with Coach. We're starting with quarterback, baby, as everyone wants to figure out and understand. I know he does too. So without any more interruption, KG, let's get to our interview with Coach Dave Clawson.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Clawson, what's up, brother? Great to see you. Welcome back to the podcast. It's summertime. I want to know what you're doing. Do you have anything outside of ball, any vacations, anything lined up that you got going on?
Well, first off, Eric and Kelly, thanks for having me on. It's always fun to visit with both you, and just enjoyed our conversation there pre-recording. So, to be honest with you, for football coaches, summer doesn't start till really the last week in June, first week in July. I think if you talk to most of us, June's become the busiest month of the year.
Oh, wow.
And, because that the signing date is now in late November, early December, this is the month that we do most of the recruiting between our camps, unofficial visits, official visits. We'll be working just about every weekend in June, either with a camp or an official visit weekend. So June's kind of become, just a sprint in terms of the recruiting. And, our players are all on campus now. So we have a chance to spend time with them and work out and meet with them. And so this is one of the busier months of the year now. This is not a laid back time at all.
Yeah. So no vacations, Mac. Coach is working, all right?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for squeezing us in.
Yeah, seriously.
Thank you.
We do appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. I think I love it, right? When, coaches complain about not having time off. The millionaires make very poor victims. So we're expected a lot. There's a lot expected of us, but a lot is given to us. So it's we enjoy being with our team and our players, and we'll get a little bit of time off in July and try to recharge the battery before we get going for the season.
Well, everybody needs that. I mean, everyone needs that recharge time. So I hope you get that, Coach. And talking about getting to know your players a little bit better, having them on campus. Summer camp is always a good time when the players are counselors and stuff. You get to know them a little more. Let's talk about your quarterback room, and let's get into this. You have a young freshman in Hecklinski, who I know you're excited about. Hank Bachmeyer was kind of the guy in the spring game. I know Michael Kern is hurt. Can you just give us a rundown of what's going on with your QB room, how you're getting to know these guys better this summer?
Well, we got to know Hank in the spring, and, we expect there to be really a two-way competition between Hank and Michael. And then it was not good that Michael missed most of the spring, but it was good that we were able to load up Hank with reps. Jeremy Hecklinski got a lot of reps. Tyler Mizell really had a good spring as well. And so right now there's kind of a battle for 1 and 2 between Michael and Hank. And then there's a battle for 3 and 4 between Jeremy and Tyler Mizell. And really the battle for 3 and 4 is probably going to be the battle for 1 and 2 for the 25 season.
Sure.
Because both Michael and Hank are in their 6th year. So, we feel certainly better about the room. Hank made good progress in the spring, and Michael looked really good before he got hurt.
I love that you said and reminded us those are 6th year guys, which, is just a new phenomenon with the COVID year. What is the biggest difference for you, Coach? Because you have a guy like Jeremy who's a true freshman, between a 6th year guy and a freshman, even football wise, but also off the field. Like as a coach, how do you approach that?
I mean, they're just generationally almost in different spots in their life. A lot of the older guys on our team that are 6th year players, and we have a bunch of them. Devontae Gordon, Kevin Pointer, Taylor Marin, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two, Capone Blue. These guys are 22, 23, 24-year-old men. A lot of them are, either engaged or have serious girlfriends, and, they kind of have a better idea who they are. Obviously, physically, they're a lot more mature. The freshmen are just still trying to find their way. But I think it's really good when you have a room that has a 6th year senior who's a mature adult, that they set an example for those younger freshmen. So I think it helps in the maturation process of the younger players when you have a 6th year guy like a Michael Kern, like a Hank Bachmeier, like a Devontae Gordon, that these guys are really professionals in terms of how they approach their football, their studies, their internships. And I think it overall, it helps the overall maturity of our football team.
Coach, how have you, just to kind of stay on that before I move to your pass catchers, how have you guys adjusted with that, with having a 6th or maybe even a 7th year guy? I mean, is it treat them a little NFL-ish where, hey, you're off Tuesdays, like your body, we don't need you banged up? The way you think about it, do you let them lead a little bit differently or more in particular state? I know we've had older guys, but it just seems like the 6th and 7th, has been a phenomenon, these last 3 years.
I think you have to, for us, if a player on our football team has played over 1,000, 1,500 live reps in games, we don't need to see those guys scrimmage as much. So when we do get the scrimmages, they're either on very limited pitch counts or their bodies don't feel good. We don't need to see those guys scrimmage. They've already played a lot of reps in games. And, I think part of the reason you do that too is when the other players who will have a 5th or a 6th year see that you are taking care of your older guys like that, hopefully it encourages those guys to want to come back. When you have a guy like Jasheen Davis, who had an NFL draftable grade last year, but it wasn't as high as he wanted it. And he comes back and, he practices and he gets work, but we don't need to see him scrimmage live. He's played enough football at a high level. And I think those guys know that we're going to take care of him, and we're going to try to get him to the game as healthy and as fresh as we can. And at the same time, right, football is a game that you need reps. You can't not give them any work at all, because then you're preparing them to fail. So it's a balance. We use our sports scientists and strength coaches and trainers to kind of try to come up with that right mix of giving them enough work that they're prepared, but trying to keep them as safe as we can so we have them for all the games.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And speaking of one of those guys, you brought him up, with Taylor Marin, but, just pass catcher wise in general, you guys have been so great at developing talent into these superstars and on the field, off the field, the things that they can do. And I know the room took a couple of hits with guys going somewhere else, but even what I saw in the spring, still, it seems like that room is status quo. I mean, it's going to be a super solid room. It looks like a lot of depth, some young guys that maybe even, finally get their shot, or inexperienced guys that get their shot that are ready. I mean, it's just they've been waiting. So what have you seen from that group, and what do you want to continue to see going into fall camp?
Well, I think the huge key for us is going to be whether we have a healthy Donovan Green.
Yeah.
Donovan has looked good. He's starting to run routes, catch the football a little bit. We expect him to be cleared. And, if your receiver room starts with Donovan Green and Taylor Marin. And then there's going to be a really healthy competition for that other outside spot between Walker Morrell and Horatio Fields. But however it pans out, both of those guys will play a lot of football. And then I think after them, we have our next generation of receivers that are going to be really good players for us. And whether that is, Deuce Alexander at the slot, Micah Mays as an outside receiver, Melvin as an outside receiver. We have some really good, young, talented guys on the outside as well that, I think we're really excited about. So that's a position that we've been able to have a good mix of older guys that have played a lot of football and kind of the next generation ready. And that's a little easier to do at receiver than other positions because at receiver, you can play 5-6 guys and keep guys healthy. Sometimes at other positions, that's a little bit harder. So like I said, when you have Donovan, Taylor Marin, Horatio Fields, Walker Morrell, those are your older guys. And then Micah Mays, Jeremiah Melvin, Deuce Alexander, and some younger guys coming in. That's really our next generation that we expect to be competitive at that position again this year.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been kind of a journey getting Donovan Green back healthy, so that's great news that he should be good to go. What's the ceiling for a guy like Donovan Green? I mean, what kind of year could he have, Coach?
Well, Donovan before last season was projected to be like a second-round draft pick.
Yeah.
So, you have a guy that's, 6'2", 6'3", over 200 pounds, vertical jumps over 40 inches, and can run in the 4.4s and can make contested catches and has great ball skills. So, I think when you look at the 22 season, when we had a healthy Donovan Green and how many plays he made, and really he was betting on himself to be a first or a second round pick.
Yeah. And
to lose him in preseason camp like we did last year was a really devastating injury for him and for us. But having Donovan Green, if he's healthy, is a difference maker for us.
Yeah. Do you ever you or anybody else on the staff kind of look at what Leggett did from South Carolina? I mean, a guy that, not that injuries and it's kind of a different circumstance, but he had one massive year and he gets drafted in the first round. I mean, that has to be, to a guy exciting, like, hey, I just have to get there. I just have to get on this field and this still can happen. I mean, is that type of, motivation, or I know he probably is very self-motivated, but does he need any of that? Does he see any of that to keep going?
Well, I think there's enough history at Wake Forest between, guys like A.T. Perry and Greg Dortch, who's still in the NFL, and Scotty Washington and Alex Bachman and Kendall Hinton. And we've had a really good run of players at that position that have played professionally. And so I think for Donovan in 22, him and A.T. Perry were really 1A and 1B, and pick your poison in terms of how you're going to defend us. So again, to get him back, and it allows Taylor Marin to go full-time at the slot. And, part of it is when you have that many good players, not everybody's going to come back. And with the world of college football now, the portal gives them that freedom to find situations that they think are better for them. And if they find places that are better fits for them, we're happy for them as well. But we feel really good about who we have.
Yeah, there were some pretty good players on that Atlantic Division championship team, Coach. And I'm glad to see that Donovan Green's coming back and going to be healthy. When talking about a different group, kind of the group you were, I think, referring to when you say it's hard to play so many guys and keep them healthy at the running back position, a guy like Demond Claiborne, who, when I think about him, I think about that kick return against Virginia Tech. No one touched him on that play. And I've seen different things, quotes from him talking about he's excited to kind of be that guy and your faith in him in the off season. So tell us more about what you're expecting from a guy like him.
Well, I think what he did the second half of last season, we don't win the Pitt game if he doesn't break off those runs. That when he gets in space, he's different in terms of his speed, his change of direction. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He could always run the football. I think part of the adjustment for any high school running back when they come to college is learning to play without the ball. It's, what type of a route runner are they? What type of pass protector are they? their ability to carry out fakes in the play action game. And Demond's a guy that just every single segment since he's been here, he takes another leap. So from his first fall to his spring to his next fall to his spring, it's just he's a fast riser. And again, I think he arguably is one of the best tailbacks we've ever had here. We had Kenneth Walker for a couple of years, who was a really good player. I think we've had some solid players. I think Demond has a chance to be a real difference maker for us because he's the ability to make people miss. He's physical, but he's also a home run hitter. Yeah. And sometimes with running backs, you get the fast guys who aren't as good between the tackles, or you get those guys that give you those 6 and 8 yard runs but can't break it. He's somebody who can do both. And we're very excited about him. And after last season, we felt really good moving forward that he could be our starting tailback and be a really high level one.
Yeah. I'm very excited to see what he can do, especially as the bell cow, like the guy, for the entire season there, kind of as he was for the end, and just, kind of things that you and I were talking about in the spring, adding to his plate that you just referenced as well, being that complete everything coming together, I think is going to be exceptional. And, one group that he's going to need to continue to grow and get better and get healthy or stay healthy is that offensive line. And I know last year, some guys were hurt and we had to play certain guys certain places, but it seemed like going into this year, there's a better feeling about that group and where you have guys. So is there that continued excitement about them, and just what do you need to see from, those guys as they come together to be that first 5?
I just think there's a lot of experience returning there. Devontae Gordon is a 6th-year offensive tackle who, again, had a draftable grade, wanted to come back and make the grade higher. And part of it was moving him from right tackle to left tackle. Matt Golbin last year had a really, really solid first year as a starter for us. Luke Pettibone is a really good center. I think Nick Sharp was on his way to having a really good year until he broke his leg in the Vanderbilt game. So even though on paper we only returned 3 starters, we really returned 4 with Nick Sharp. And the job that's open is that right tackle job. And that'll come between Eric Russell and Keegan Trost, who was a transfer from Indiana State. And then George Sell is another good player inside for us that had a really good spring, and he'll compete to play. So I think from 1 to 7, 1 to 8, we're feeling that position is a lot more solid than it was a year ago going into the year. Just because, as you know, Eric, that's a position. Game reps are game reps, and nothing takes the place of game experience on the O-line. And right. Their ability to sort things out, and when they get a defense that maybe we didn't prepare for that week, but they had seen before, and they can make the right calls and they'll make adjustments. You have less wasted reps and less wasted plays when you have a veteran group up there. So again, I think that group is no question on the rise, and the key, like always for us, is going to be to stay healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. One thing that was interesting that I'd love to hear from you, maybe from a general purpose. I know you said the right tackle spot is open and guys are fighting for that, and similar to quarterback as well. How do you handle, or how do you kind of manage a position battle? I mean, is it a guy this day will get first team reps, the other guy will get second, and then you switch them, or does a guy just earn it and then maybe he gets a spot there? Just in general, how do you like to handle position battles?
Well, I think you go into it and say, what do you want it to look like when the season starts? And what we'd love to look like when the season starts is at the tackle position, you'd love to have a pair and a spare. You'd love for 3 guys to be playable. And so what we do is we roll those 3 guys with the first group, and Devontae Gordon, if he's out there, he's going to play left tackle. And then one day, Eric Russell would be the starter at right tackle. The next day, Keegan would. But then when we roll them through, at times, Eric and Keegan are the right and the left tackles.
Oh, cool.
And so that way you're giving Devontae Gordon, your 6th-year left tackle who's played 2,000 reps, some snaps off. And, you're preparing for, what happens if he goes down. And then, we have another guy, Zach Vaughn, who is in his 5th year, who had a really good spring as well. So you're preparing for all the contingencies. And we did the same thing inside with George Sell. We really viewed it. We had 4 starters, and one day George would be up and Matt Gulbin or Nick Sharp would be down. And then when we just went ones, we'd have a rotation that it was 4 for 3 inside, so that you're saying, okay, if you lose your center, this is how you're going to adjust. If you lose your left guard, this is how you're going to adjust. Because you go through a 12-game season, and at some point that's going to happen.
Mm. Yeah, like you said, staying healthy is the key. And one of those guys, you mentioned him earlier. We're going to transition and talk some defense, Coach, because we have to. Mac and I tend to lean one way. But Jasheen Davis, he's easy to talk about. And tell me a bit more about that process you were referencing earlier. Had an NFL grade, came back because he wants to make that grade a little higher. He also seems like a real Wake Forest guy, wants to get that degree. So tell me more about Jasheen and what you expect from him.
Well, you just summed it up. I think he saw what Boogie Basham did a few years ago. Boogie had like a 5th-year grade and came back and played one more year and made himself a 2nd-round grade.
Yeah.
And, not to get too deep into the weeds and the finances, but in the NFL, if you're a 2nd-round pick, it's life-changing from a 5th-round pick.
Wait, guys can do that math, Coach. They can do that math.
That's right. No question.
So he had a draftable grade, but it wasn't where he wanted it. And Jasheen, education's important to him. He's a semester away from getting his degree. And that's where NIL is really valuable. So a guy like that can come back. He can get his degree, which was important to him, with name, image, likeness. He can make a few pennies and, has a chance to really increase his draft value. So it's kind of a win-win. And, nowadays too, you can get insurance for these guys so that you mitigate the risk of an injury. And, we try to get ahead of that with them and tell them that this is what we're allowed to do and permitted to do in terms of the insurance. But again, one of the great things about being at Wake Forest is we're still a school that is trying to run a college football program. I think our graduation success rate is the 2nd highest in the country, only 2nd to the school that you two graduated from.
Yeah.
And, people don't like to talk about that anymore in college football, but I think for those of us that got into it, 30 years ago and 35 years ago, adding value to the players other than NIL and their NFL draft pick is still important to us. And I think that value permeates through our program, and we don't want to lose sight of that. So we're very excited that Jasheen will finish his degree, graduate, and hopefully make himself a higher draft pick in the process.
Yeah. Very well said, Coach. Very well said. Just to touch on Jasheen one more second, because I think he is such a dynamic player, and everybody's going to game plan for him. Everybody's going to circle him. Everybody's going to say, watch out for this cat. How do you guys put a player like that? Because I'm sure it was the same way with Boogie. Sure, it was the same way with a number of guys. How do you put that player in a position to succeed, knowing they're probably getting the slide, they're probably getting double teamed, they're getting a chip, things of that nature? So how can you help him to still be that dynamic of a guy and make plays?
Well, I think the best way of helping him is to keep the other guys around him. Kevin Pointer is a pretty good defensive tackle who came back for his 6th year. Justin Cody started for us last year. He's coming back for his 6th year. Kendron Wayman is coming back for his 5th year. Bryce Gaines, who had a really good year for us last year, is coming back. So, we're probably too deep in the front. And, the bottom line is if people want to slide the protection to Jasheen, you have to have other guys that can win.
Sure.
You can't slide it to Jasheen and to Kevin Pointer. Those guys are probably going to be on opposite sides. And so if you're going to slide it to Jasheen, then Kevin's got to be able to win, or Kendron's got to be able to win. And, part of it is, trying to find the best matchups. Part of on the D line is, can you find the tackle that Jasheen can beat? Can you find the guard that Kevin Pointer can beat? And you give those guys an opportunity to win those matchups. And you also present looks from a blitz standpoint that maybe you can create the slide away from them.
Right.
That you're either, if you're going to slide to him, then you're sliding away from numbers. And so schematically, your blitz game has to be able to have answers for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. Two other guys that just caught my eye that I know you're excited about, that just in the game, the way they look, the way they moved. I got jacked up to see them and can't wait to see them in live football wearing, the black there is Patterson and Combs, kind of the safety and the linebacker position. Guys that were flying around, looked really good. What's kind of the expectation from them this season?
Our expectation is they're both going to be good players. Last year, I think people got very excited about watching Malik Mustafa, that he was kind of a heat-seeking missile, and he got drafted in the 4th round. And, we have, a lot of safeties back. Nick Anderson is back. Evan Slocum is back. But Devon Patterson is a very, very dynamic player that can play safety. He can play outside linebacker. He's a difference maker on special teams. We think he has a chance to be really, really special. And Brandon Combs, again, he's another FCS transfer. It'll be his 6th year. So we have about half our defensive guys are going to be qualifying for Social Security in the next 3 to 4 years. And he's just an experienced football player that's played a lot of football. And, he came from Southern Illinois, and that was a really good playoff level FCS program. And we've had a lot of success here with FCS transfers. Kobe Turner transferred from Richmond and became a 3rd round pick. Malik Mustafa transferred from Richmond. He became a 4th round pick. Those guys that have played a lot of football, albeit at a lower level, but they understand the game. They're smart. They're older. What happens with those guys is they come to a place like Wake Forest and they're just so happy because of the locker room and the facilities and the training room and the nutrition, that we're just able to provide a lot more support for those guys than they get at an FCS program just because of the finances. And those guys become very, very happy football players. And they tell the other guys in the locker room, you guys have no idea how good you have it here, which sometimes that attitude of gratitude and what that can do for a locker room is pretty powerful. And I think they make the other guys appreciate, maybe some things they've taken for granted. So we're very excited about Branson. We think he's going to be a really good player. Jacob Roberts last year was a transfer from North Carolina A&T that's now with the Philadelphia Eagles. So we've done really well with those guys.
Coach, let's get into this schedule because it is very interesting, as I'm sure you know. And you guys don't go on the road until, what is that, October 5th, which is interesting. So tell me if you like that. And then also tell me how you feel about going out to Stanford, which to me, right, like brain bowl of the century here. We got Wake Forest and Stanford. I love it. But you also have to fly a very long distance. So what do you think about those things?
You get to the point anymore, Kelly. You control the things you can control.
That's right.
There's a lot of things that happened. Obviously, the addition of Stanford, Cal, and SMU, makes us the bi-coastal conference.
That's right.
But those are great institutions and great schools. And with everything going on in college football and lawsuits, you certainly understand why there was a necessity to add those schools.
Yeah.
And so part of being a charter member of the ACC and a good partner is we're excited that they're in the league and we're excited to play them. And, all of us are going to have to do a little travel, but I think it was a great move by Commissioner Phillips and our presidents to make sure that the ACC continues to exist for as long as it possibly can, and hopefully for, decades and another century. So they've secured the league for a little bit. And part of when you secure the league, you have to fly out there. Fortunately, when we fly out there, the following week, we have a bye week.
Yeah.
And so I think anytime you go out west, right, it's never the trip out there that gets you because you get those extra few hours.
Yeah.
It's always the trip back.
Right.
And so when I saw that we were playing Stanford, I was more hoping that we'd have a bye week after the Stanford game than before. And so we'll take the red eye back afterwards and give our guys the next day off. And we'll have 11, 12 days to recoup before we play Cal on a Friday night.
Yeah, that makes sense. To have it after seems like the way to go. Just for the beginning of the schedule, is there any negative to not having a road game till NC State? I mean, obviously, you want to play at home, you want to play in front of your
Yeah,
fans.
and that wasn't by design. Again, conference
Yeah.
affiliations and those things. All of a sudden, Army joins the American, and so they
Mhm.
cancel our game with us, and we need to find another game. And so we switch Connecticut from a home game to an away game, and we pick up Louisiana, so we don't have 8 home games.
Right.
And anymore with the way schedules change, you just want to make sure that you have 12 games when the season starts. And so, again, I've been doing this long enough that those things happen, and the schedule's the schedule, and we're excited for it. And it's every week's a new season, so we'll take those challenges week by week.
Yeah, no question about it. We're excited to see it. Last one for you, Coach. More of a big picture question, but specific to you and how you guys will handle it. We're going to have iPads with video on the sidelines, and you're going to be able to look at that and diagnose plays and series immediately, with your QBs, with your receivers, running backs, whoever, defensive players as well. And also we're going to have that helmet, to coach communication, player to coach communication. Could you touch on both of those? Do you like it? How does it help? And just your mindset, because obviously this is brand new for everybody, on how you guys will handle it and how you feel about it.
Do I like it? Every other level of football does it. So college football was really behind. I always thought part of the challenge of coaching and the skill of coaching was the coaches that could make those adjustments without the video.
Right.
The training your eyes, and that was a way, I think, of gaining an advantage. But now that we have video and helmet-to-helmet communication, you try to find ways strategically. How can that help you? How can you be efficient with it? What's your game plan going in? What's the communication now after a series? Because you have this video to watch and you can't watch it during the series. And so before you had this perception of what you thought happened, and now you have video, so you know exactly what happened, but is there a delay in getting that information to the players? And so let's say, whatever, you come off the field on offense and you make all these adjustments, and then your defense is 3 and out. You can't take too much time, the old paralysis through analysis.
Right.
That you spend so much time watching the film that you don't get the relevant information to your players. So we're going to have to take segments in practice that we're going to treat it like a game, that we're going to have a 10-minute team segment and then have a 7-minute break and get our coaches used to the communication that's going to happen in a game. And so, and the coach to player communication is tricky because you can only have one person out there that has the dot.
Right.
And so, let's say it's your middle linebacker. Well, let's say your backup middle linebacker is also your backup will, and your will goes down and he goes in there. We had to order like 40 more helmets for this.
Jeez.
Because every player that could possibly have the communication device.
Right.
Has to have the helmet.
A spare helmet. Right.
Just
Sure.
a spare helmet.
And even like on kickoff, right now, the rule is, it's, most of your linebackers and all those guys that would wear the green dot are traditionally on your kickoff team. And so they're going to have a different helmet for kickoff than they have for defense.
How weird.
And so we'll figure it out. I think our equipment manager is the one losing more sleep than any of us about it.
That's right.
That's so interesting.
Will you be the one talking to the quarterback, or will you let your offensive coordinator?
No, our offensive coordinator will.
Okay.
So
that to me is going to be fascinating, how people handle
Who
that.
does that? Yeah.
How do those coaches that are in charge of that, are they too much talking? Are they not enough talking? It's going to be very interesting to see how this happens and how it affects
people. And part of it is you talk to the people in the NFL because they've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And every single one of them will tell you that, that their system isn't perfect either. Sometimes it goes out in games.
Of course. Hey, you've seen a quarterback just screaming at the sideline. It's pandemonium, man.
So the challenge is you have to still practice your signals.
Sure.
And you still have to, so you have to practice 2 different ways of communicating plays. And, so again, technology is great. It's certainly advanced, but you better have a plan B in case those headphones and coach-to-coach communication go down.
Fun times, baby. Let's just keep making changes. Let's just keep making changes. Coach, we appreciate you so much. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate your insight, and can't wait to watch you guys this year.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Kelly. Always fun to visit with you.
Thanks again to Dave Clawson for joining us from Winston-Salem. Appreciate his time. So let's talk about the Deacs, Mac. It feels like this is very much going to be a different year. You've got some of your main pieces. Obviously, Mitch Griffiths has moved on, and you've got some new pieces at quarterback with Bachmeier and Hecklinski, who's the big freshman, who I know they're excited about. Demond Claiborne is back. You heard Dave Clawson talking about him at running back. They're super pumped about him. But it's just, it felt like to me with Clawson, and we did kind of talk about what he has to deal with at Wake Forest, his roster getting, rated by some people and all that. Feels kind of like a back to the basics year for Wake. Back to what they do best, and playing fast, playing at a high tempo. It's not the slow mesh. What do they call it? The pace and space? Is that what it is?
Pace and space, hang and bang, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you, the hang and bang. Back to the basics there on offense.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because we don't quite know who's going to be the guy. There's three that I think they feel pretty good about. One, as you mentioned, in Hecklinski being a young freshman. But I was at the spring game. I was on the field, saw it up close and personal. He lit it up, and we've seen Wake Forest have success with that before, a la Sam Hartman.
Yeah,
one of the best, if not the best, to ever wear the black and gold there. So it'll be fascinating to see who can just separate at the end of the day and who can pull forward and really be the guy. The schedule starts in a hurry, right? Like they've got Virginia, they've got Ole Miss, they've got Louisiana, NC State, Clemson. I mean, it's back to back to back to back after starting with NCA&T. So you want to have your guy. You want to have your plan in place, what you feel good about. And it'll be interesting to see how does that manipulate or how does that change, the situation at hand. And do you just not have time, for a freshman to get ready, to do that on that stage. So we'll see there. But when you have a guy like Demond Claiborne, when you have so many talented wide receivers led by Green, led by Marin, and some others that I think are going to be really good now that they have their opportunity, it'll be interesting to see. I do expect the offense to pick up. They came off a season where they were averaging less than 20 points in a lot of games. We're not used to seeing that. We're used to seeing effective offense, moving the ball, scoring points. I think we get back to that this season for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was, they put all their chips in the Mitch Griffiths basket and it didn't work out. So then you're just kind of scrambling at quarterback from the beginning. And now it feels like they have a better plan. Bachmeier's definitely been a journeyman, but can Dave Clawson kind of harness him? And then does Hecklinski come in there at some point? The wide receiver room is talented as always. It was really fun to hear Dave Clawson talk about how much pride he takes in developing wide receivers. But, Mac, I do like, yes, the schedule. I think this is a tougher schedule. But you at least open with A&T, not trying to take anything away from A&T, but you open with a game where you can kind of figure yourself out. That's good. I think that's better than, opening at Minnesota or opening at Georgia, like some team in this league is doing. So I think that is good. But then you're right. You have Virginia at home. And, Virginia is going to be ready for that game. That's a game that both teams really think they can win, I'm sure. Ole Miss at home. I mean, what? That's a situation.
Brutal.
Louisiana, NC State, Clemson. Like, that's the beginning. And then you've got that trip. They're one of the teams that goes out to California. They go out to Stanford. And they finish with at UNC, at Miami, and Duke. I think this schedule, Mac, is part of why their win total's at 4.5. And
it's brutal.
I think a bowl game would be an exceptional year for Wake if they can get to a bowl game with the schedule.
I think a bowl game would be a grand slam.
Yeah.
I think you're feeling great. Just because, again, the transition and uncertainty at quarterback right now, and just the difficulty of this, run here. I mean, I'm looking at this with Ole Miss, NC State, Clemson, Miami.
Yeah.
4 teams that you could argue could potentially be in the college football playoff.
Definitely.
That is nuts. I'm not saying all together. I'm just saying one of the probably maybe 2 at best, maybe one of the 3 with the ACC teams, and then potentially Ole Miss, which a lot of people have very high expectations for. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a gauntlet with this schedule and the things that they're able to do. I hate to do this because I love Coach Clawson. I think he's a genius, but I think
we love you, Coach.
Under is the play.
I agree.
I think under's the play. I can't stand it. I hope that offense gets back, but it's just quarterback. And if you don't have a solid, firm guy, you don't feel super great about it, especially with the defenses that you're going to be playing against of the teams that I just mentioned.
Mac, let me throw out this stat here. So shout out to our new intern, by the way. Intern Nick, who's our researcher.
Come on, Nick. He's killing it. Y'all will see more of Nick in the season. I can't wait for this.
He's put together some really great preview information for us. And with Hank Bachmeier, who, again, we describe as a journeyman, right? He's headed to Wake. He was from Louisiana Tech. He was also at Boise State. And against FIU last season, our guy Hank recorded the most completions by a La Tech player since 2019 with 34. He's had his moments, Mac. He's had his moments.
Oh, yeah.
Can Clawson turn him into what they want? And by the way, Hank's brother does play for Stanford. I think that's amazing. Tiger Bachmeier. I'm intrigued. I think the under, you're right, Mac, the under is what it is. But let's see if Wake can make some noise. Perhaps lower expectations, just like UNC. Don't have much expectations here. I think we had higher expectations on Wake last year than we do this year. Mm-hmm. Can they sneak under the radar?
Yeah, and again, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing that we're not talking over the moon about this team and the things that they can do. I know there's players sprinkled throughout. You heard Coach talking and raving about his defensive guys and guys that he think are going to really be able to take another step. We'll see. It'll be fascinating. Brutal schedule. Doesn't do you any favors. But
Matt,
that's it, KG.
That's life in the Atlantic Coast Conference, baby.
That's right. It's a gauntlet. We're tearing it up every week. You got to be ready. And we're tearing up this. We're halfway through the week. We're rolling, KG. We've got 2 episodes left. So big shout out to Willie P helping us out, get Coach Clawson, Coach, for his time. And always a pleasure talking with him and talking about the Deacs today. So we need y'all's help. Go over to YouTube, subscribe, leave some comments. Tell us what you think about the Deacs. Are we crazy? Is this schedule not as hard as we think? I think it's pretty tough. And then, of course, the OGs over on Apple Podcasts. Rate, review, subscribe there as well. We would greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.